Going. So last time we finished up, we were in our traditional command market economies, and we ended on the command economy. And if I remember right, time just kind of got away, and we're like, oh, it's 45 already, so it's time to go. So we'll recap the traditional economy. Looked at was economies based off of tradition. Um, we just do things the way they've always been done. The second one was a command economy. This is where we said uh, a government or central power is making the economic decisions. Remember, economic decisions are what to purchase, what to produce, how to produce the goods, and what prices to charge, or what price and quantity to produce. And that's kind of where we ended last time. So today we're getting into our third system, which is the market economy. And in this type of economy, we're going to see that our decisions are going to be largely decentralized. That is, if I want to, so if I want to, so if I wanted to sell, say, this box of tissues, and suppose this box of tissues is mine to sell, not the college's, right? We can right here in this classroom make this transaction. We don't have to report it. It's just I sold a box of tissues, or if I wanted to charge a nickel for a tissue, right? I can charge it, and I would be free to do that. Of course, these are not mine, so I wouldn't be in that spot. But you get what I'm getting at. So when we see the market economy, we're going to see that resources are owned by private individuals, not by the government, and goods and services are based off of demand. Uh, that is, we figure out, well, what do we want to produce based off of what people want and what we want to actually produce. So in the market economy, we see that we have what's called a marketplace. And traditionally, we kind of think of a marketplace as like Walmart or anywhere like that. In the sense of economics, this is going to be what? This is going to be any time a transaction takes place. So the market isn't just this, isn't necessarily a place. Instead, it's actually the interaction between buyers and sellers. And for it, it combines supply and demand to figure out prices, quantities, and all that good stuff. The third kind of characteristic we have is called private enterprise. In this case, we see that private individuals or groups of private individuals own and operate the means of production. So if you think about any business, so if we start out, if you think about, say, Dutch Oven, it's owned by the Van Hemert family. So that family owns the restaurant. They produce their products there. But even something like Ford or General Motors, which is this large company shared on the stock market, when you think of these giant companies, it's still, if I go out and I buy a share of Ford or General Motors, I still own one share of it. So I, as an individual, own a part of it. And those companies are owned by a group of people who own shares in those companies. So even our large companies are owned by this group of private individuals. And that's kind of our market economy. We don't have so while we may be more market oriented in the States, we don't really have a sense of a pure market economy. We'll see why in the next little bit. So in the real world, we're going to see that most economies are considered mixed. That is, we take some aspect of command, traditional, and market systems. So if we think about the U.S., so in the U.S., we do have aspects of a traditional economy. That is, one, family-owned businesses get passed from along family lines oftentimes. And in this sense, we hear about a business being second, third, fourth generation family-run business, right? That's saying, hey, someone a few generations ago started it, their kids then ran it, then their grandkids ran it, then their great-grandkids ran it, so on and so on. So we have businesses passed along family lines. Second bit we have is certain types of licensing. And for this, what I'm going to get at is the example I'm going to use is lobster fishing in Maine. So suppose today one of us thinks, you know what, it'd be fun to go catch lobster up in Maine commercially, uh, not as an individual, but as a commercial business, make a living off of it. In Maine, to be a commercial lobster fishery, you have to have a license for it, and so on, right? And the idea is, if everybody just went up and caught lobster, we'd basically overfish lobster. So with these licenses, if you wanted to, so say right now I decide, you know what, I'm gonna go catch lobster, I'm gonna apply for a license. There's about and our guide told us this when we were up there, it's like a 30 to 40 year wait list to get this license to catch lobster in Maine. So for me to be able to do it, by the time I retire from DMAC, I'd be able to go catch lobster. But the question is, what's that? No. No, when I'm retired, I'm gonna go I'll go up to Maine sometimes, but I'll be traveling. But right now it'd be 30, 40 year wait. Maybe by the time I retire, I could have a permit. But there's a second way to get one. If my parents had a permit, they can pass that license down to me.
Like a dynasty.
Yes. Right. And just like your businesses, if we think about Dutch oven, if the current owners of it want to pass it to their kids, they're free to do so. So we have that lobster fishing in Maine, which that kind of fits a traditional economy. And a third one is on the consumer side, but potentially, I'm gonna say it's something like season football tickets. And the two places I'm going to point out are University of Iowa and Iowa State. So I think this is how it works at University of Iowa. I'm not sure if this is how it works at Iowa State. But so basically, if I go buy season tickets right now, at Iowa, I know this is the case. If I go buy season tickets, either basketball or football, I'm going to be put in near the nosebleeds, right? I'm not going to get the best seat in the house the first year I decide to buy season tickets. But as I buy more and more and more, and I keep contributing, I get to move down. I get better seats. I get first pick, so on and so on. And I think at Iowa this is true. I don't know about Iowa State, but I believe Iowa has some type of legacy deal where if, say, my grandparents have gotten like the kind of the sweet spot, the best seats in the stadium, they can pass those seats down to what would be my parents, or they can pass it down to us if they wanted to.
That is so extra.
What?
That is so extra.
And what was that? Sorry. Okay. And Iowa may not. I don't know much about the legacy, but I'm pretty sure some places do. So cool. And we'll stick. Rolled over to you. Yeah. I mean, and with that, you'd still have to pay for them. They don't give them for free, but I'll take Iowa State off then. Yeah.
I think that's an example.
Yeah.
I'm not for sure, but I don't.
And I'm gonna put on that legacy, kind of legacy type deal. Cool. We have those. So in the U.S., we have these aspects of a traditional. If we think about our command side, one, we have these what we may call STILI health and fire codes. Right. So I can't go to McDonald's right now and buy moldy bread. If I did, it would be illegal. Right? They're not allowed to sell me moldy bread. I don't know why. Maybe I want moldy bread, but they're not allowed to sell that. Same thing with things like a fire code. So suppose that we thought it would be more, suppose we said classes just aren't fun enough, right? We need to put more excitement, put a little more thrill into the classroom experience. So to do that, we're going to take some live wires, hang them from the ceiling, and boom, right? If I happen to run into one, right, it puts a little more action into the class, makes things a little more exciting. Well, that's what we're getting at. But if we did these live wire type things, right, it would be Um, the fire marshal probably wouldn't appreciate that, right? Because there's potential for if something, well, one, if I hit it, I'd get electrocuted. If some type of paper towel hits it or something like that, maybe it causes a fire, gets on the carpet, then the whole room goes ablaze, or whatever the case may be. But we have fire codes, so our buildings have to be built in a way that won't cause them to like burn, or that should be harder to burn. And with health codes, we can't buy moldy bread. Even though we don't necessarily think of it as much, those are aspects of a command economy. That's the main one I have right now. I think I have another one, but I don't want to spend 5 minutes trying to think of what it is. And the second one is the last one we have is the market. And with this one, if we largely think about our day-to-day lives, right? So if you leave here today, so at 1:45 we'll be done. If you want to go wherever you want to go, you're free to do so, right? You don't have to ask anybody. So if you want to spend money on McDonald's, you can go to McDonald's, spend money there. You don't have to ask the mayor, the governor, the president, or your boss, right? You just go. That's what you want to spend money on. That's where you go to spend money. And same thing with like our, with our with what you choose to do, right? With your career, when you came in, you were pretty much free to pick whatever major you wanted to go into, and whatever you decide to go into is what you go into. If you don't yet meet the qualifications for a certain program, you go in, get those qualifications met, then sign up for the program. But you have that choice of where to go, what to do, and so on. So that's kind of how we are mixed economy. Shows our three, and give me just a second to get caught up. Cool. So that gets us into kind of why do we not have an absolute free market? And the reason for this is because of our regulations. And with our regulations, basically they say, hey, what's the rules of the market? What's the rules of how we interact and so on? So we don't have, as we said, we don't have this absolutely free market. But what we do say is we have market-oriented economies. So if we think about this, our market economies will have fewer regulations than a command economy. And the ideal kind of that we have, if we're looking for, or I'll say overall, I think ideally, we'd have just enough regulations to keep an even playing field for our participants. However, what's considered an even playing field can be very heavily debated. Yes. What's that? Yeah, sure. Yep. So what we consider an even playing field can be very heavily debated. Some people say pretty much as long as the law is blind, that's even. Some people are more along the lines of like we were talking about these legacy type deals, right? Maybe it's is it necessarily right that just because the Van Hemert kids are in line to run Dutch Oven that they get to? Some people say, well, that's not really fair, and so on. And we have everything in between, right? So we have extreme where some people say, hey, as long as everyone's playing by the same rules, we're good. Others who come in say, well, if there's any type of deal where your parents maybe set you up to be have a little easier life, whatever the case is, right? That's not fair. Then we have everything in between. And this is where a lot of our debate's going to come in, is what is considered an even playing field. One of the issues that we have, so we have this trade-off. So if we have more regulation, right, it sounds good because we just say, right, pass a law that fixes everything. However, as we pass more laws and we enact more regulations, we're going to see come up are these underground economies, or as we may have heard them called before, black markets, which are basically markets that go on without approval of the government. So some examples of these may first be we have like things like pirated music and movies. Right. So the government passes copyright laws to say, hey, I can't just go and I can't record which one? I can't get on Disney Plus, record Toy Story 4, and sell them all to you for $5 a piece, right? That's breaking the copyright. I could be in pretty big trouble for that. And although that is illegal, if I don't get caught, I can sell Toy Story 4 for you to $5, while if you go to the store, it's going to be $20, $25, $30, right? So we have that black market that comes up. And another one that we see a little more and we hear about it is illegal products. And by illegal products, we mean things like drugs, that's the main thing I'm going to stick with. We have things like drugs, right? And by drugs, we mean our harder drugs. I'm keeping it general because I'm uploading this to YouTube and I don't want to be flagged as having inappropriate content for saying certain names of certain drugs. But it is illegal, and we have laws that prevent them. Yet people still get their hands on certain types of drugs that we have labeled as illegal, whether they be street drugs, pharmaceuticals, whatever the case may be. People get a hold of them, people sell them, and so on. Yes.
Is it similar to like when people sell like kidneys and stuff? Is that like the same with the black market?
Yeah. So the question is basically organ sales for things like kidneys and stuff like that considered a black market. Yes, that would be, because it is illegal to sell your organs, but
I just feel like we do that when we give our kidney to somebody at an actual like.
well, it depends. From a legal sense, it depends if you're donating it or selling it. So if you donate it, it's legal, right? If someone says, hey, I need a kidney, and we were a match, or someone else was a match and it works, is you donate it, it's perfectly legal, but you cannot sell your organs. There's actually, with that, a movement to be able to allow people to sell organs. The idea being that so if we think about kidneys, there's a shortage. So if you wanted to get more kidneys in the system, you can offer the donors a incentive or payment, and they'd be more willing to donate.
Is that like something?
So if we were to make that legal, it would just be a piece of legislation that goes through, gets passed, and we legalize the sale of organs pretty much. Correct. And same thing with any of this stuff. If we think about drugs, if we legalize certain drugs, or if we legalize a green plant that has like 5 leaves or something like that, right? If we legalize a certain green plant, there still may be a black market depending on what the legal price is, but
Does that just depend on states then? Each state, more or less, because like, for instance, like weed's legal at this state, but not at this state, so would it be considered black market for the state that it's not legal?
it depends. So if I went to Colorado, or I can go to Illinois now.
Yeah.
If I went to Illinois, bought a bunch of this green plant, then brought it back into Iowa, right? If I were selling it here, it would be a black market transaction. And more than likely, if I sold it as an individual in Illinois, it would also be a black market because I'm not registered and all that fun stuff. But there is now a way in Colorado, Illinois, Washington, Oregon to buy that green plant without having to be in the black market for it. So yeah, if we make something legal, it's no longer a part, or there won't be as large of a black market for it. And there could be black markets out to avoid taxes or whatever the case is, but for the most part, the ones we hear most about are outright illegal products. So when we think about regulations in the U.S., we kind of talked about them on our command economy side. We have things like fire codes, health codes. Any type of law we have would be a regulation. So we have minimum wage laws. You can't go work for somebody for $5 an hour. The regulations in the U.S., any type of regulation you can think of, it's a regulation. We're familiar with a lot of them. We have speed limits, all that good stuff. Your cars have to meet a certain safety standard, and all that good stuff. So last little bit for chapter 1 looks at this idea of globalization. And when we see globalization, when we think about this, we sometimes hear about this from like Illuminati standpoint. We hear the term globalization and it's all that. The economic sense isn't really the Illuminati sense of it. So when we think about globalization, we're just saying that as we go through time, there's more trade that happens across international borders. So it's become easier in the past 50 years to buy a product from China or Malaysia or wherever I want to buy stuff from. These next two we're kind of getting into more later, so I'm just going to breeze through them pretty much. But exports, these are goods that we produce domestically, then we sell abroad. So if you think about a Ford that's made in, say, Detroit and gets sold in Japan, that would be considered an export. An import is a good that is produced abroad yet sold domestically. So if you think about the Surface or any of our electronic devices, more than likely, they're probably made in China, Taiwan, wherever they're made. So they're made abroad, then sold domestically. Then our GDP looks at the size of total production in an economy. GDP will really get into in the start of Unit 2. We have a whole chapter on GDP. Exports and imports will fall under that. Globalization, all that's saying is, as we go through time, it becomes easier and easier to trade across borders. So with that, any questions, comments, issues with chapter 1?